Hi there. Welcome to day 2 of the 5-day dad reset, or if you're not a dad, guy reset. This video is all about food, but maybe not in the way that you're used to thinking about it. You're not going to be counting macros, you're not going to be calorie counting. We're just going to try and make simple changes that can radically improve how you feel in 5 days. So let's get into it. The real problem with our food is inflammation. Most of us have really no idea how good your body is supposed to feel. Years of eating inflammatory foods create kind of this silent damage. It's not necessarily inflammation that you feel like you see in that picture in the knee all the time, but it's inflammation at the cellular level. And this chronic inflammation fuels every major disease, whether it's heart disease or asthma or arthritis or colitis or whatever your itis is. It's inflammation at the cellular level. And we've got to decrease that inflammation as long as supporting mitochondria, which is sort of a different topic, because that inflammation is the root of most of the things that we call disease. Inflammatory foods will propagate these issues and problems and lead to flare ups sometimes. And underneath those flare ups, your body is aging faster than it has to and feeling worse than it has to. But if you change your food, things will start to shift. And here's the key changes that we're going to make for this 5 days. We could get a lot more extensive, and I want you to know that, the number one thing is that the quality of food matters no matter what you're eating. But these are 4 basics that you want to do. You want to get rid of processed sugars. Sugar is the most inflammatory food. It causes something called glycation. When you eat sugar, your blood sugar spikes and your insulin drives some of that sugar into the cells, depending on how sensitive you are to your insulin. What it can't drive into the cells goes through a process called glycation. Glycation is the process by where a sugar molecule is attached to a protein molecule. And the most common protein in the body is collagen. Collagen is your skin, obviously, but collagen is also in your blood vessels. And once it gets attached, it creates what's called advanced glycation end products. These, also known as AGEs, are responsible for a lot of damage at the cellular level, like skin aging. But if it's in your blood vessels, it can cause hardening or stiffening of your arteries because the oxidation that happens to that sugar molecule from either sunlight or regular heat or energy production in your body tends to oxidize that collagen and cause that stiffening, which leads to high blood pressure and a whole cascade of other problems. So that's the problem with sugar. And then the next process is refined grains, which is basically processed carbs like bread and pasta and tortillas and all these things that are processed by wheat. Even most things that are labeled whole wheat is still processed in a way that makes it easy to digest and absorb it. Because it's easy to digest and absorb, it acts like sugar by spiking your blood sugar and going through that whole same process. The third thing we're going to get rid of for this week is alcohol. Now, alcohol is basically a brain poison. I don't drink much alcohol anymore. Not that I'm against drinking, or I didn't even want to quit drinking, but I have this Aura ring. This Aura ring measures my heart rate and my sleep. And I just noticed that even with 2 drinks where I wouldn't even get a buzz, the next day my sleep was awful, my heart rate was up 10 or 15 beats. And just seeing those numbers has removed my craving to drink alcohol. So either I'll have a drink, maybe 1 drink, or I'm going to get drunk. So I know that I'm just going to pay the price and go for it. But we're not doing that in the 5-day reset. The 5-day reset is removing alcohol. And then the last thing on the key foods for the 5-day reset is the removal of seed oils. We're going to go into that. It requires its own special category. But the bottom line is, if you do nothing more than remove these 4 things for your diet for the next 5 days, you will feel better. You'll feel the difference. And so I want you to pay close attention to how your body feels. Let's just do a quick one on seed oils and the dangers of seed oils. Seed oils, safflower, sunflower, and canola oil, is basically omega-6 fatty acids. They're everywhere. Almost every salad dressing, unless you can get one that's totally olive oil, bread, tortillas, even like coffee creamers and stuff like that, all have seed oils. Palm oil also included omega 6. Olive oil is omega 9, so it's not dangerous. Omega 6 fatty acids, even when they're in the right ratio, go down a biochemical fat pathway in your body that leads to inflammation. Now, you need some inflammation, right? You need to heal wounds and your blood needs to clot sometimes, but you don't want to be overly inflamed at the cellular level. So, you want to have that omega 6 to omega 3, which is fish oils, balanced. Our ancestors had a much closer to one balance, and we're more like 10 to 1. One of the things I do in my extensive program is I check an omega balance lab test to see exactly where you're at. And so this omega balance promotes inflammation, but not only do they cause short term inflammation, they get incorporated into your cellular membranes, especially linoleic acid, which these are high in linoleic acid, which is difficult for your body to burn. So once you put on fat made with the linoleic acid in these seed oils, it's more difficult to burn. It disrupts your body's ability to burn fat. It keeps you in a long-term inflammatory state. You're less efficient at using fat for fuel. You may feel more sluggish. It can impact cravings and fatigue because energy production is impaired. The inflammation stays elevated even when you clean up your diet until you burn all that fat. So if you cut them to completely, you'll decrease the short-term cellular inflammation, and then it's going to take a while to burn off those that have been incorporated. So you want to get your omega balance in line, and you can do that, number one, by decreasing your seed oils, if not eliminating them. And the other is by increasing your omega 3s. And then a bonus tip in terms of burning it off is intermittent fasting, which we'll talk about, and zone 2 exercise. Zone 2 exercise is the fat burning zone. The problem with zone 2 exercise is it doesn't feel like you're doing that much, right? It's only 60%, 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. You can still hold a conversation while you're doing zone 2. It's not even really jogging. It's like brisk walking or a bike ride where you can still have a conversation. But that zone is where your body preferentially burns fat rather than having your liver do gluconeogenesis, which makes new glucose to burn, or using protein from your muscle. And so the fix for this, what should you eat? Not only when we eliminate the 4 things, I want you to think simple for this week. I want you to think eating like your great grandma ate, with real proteins, real foods. Healthy fats are fine, like avocados and nuts, vegetables. A side note, get organic as much as possible to avoid glyphosate, which is the poison that's used for pesticides. That kills your gut microbiome. I should have done a whole talk about the microbiome because it's so important. But one of the best things you can do for your microbiome is avoid Roundup, glyphosate, pesticides. Otherwise, you don't need any exotic superfoods. It's more about keeping the healthy, well-sourced foods than it is about anything exotic. And just let your body remember what it was like to have good nourishment. In order to do this, I want you to focus on a few key things. First, don't bring the bad stuff into your house. How do you do that? Number one, don't shop when you're hungry. All right. When you're hungry, you'll pick anything off the shelf and bring it home. And if you leave it out of your house, you're much less likely to eat it. Number two, stay on the perimeter of the grocery store. I'm sure you've heard this before, but groceries on the perimeter is the produce aisle and the fruits and vegetables, and those things are definitely more healthy. The frozen food aisle is not so bad if you stay within the vegetables. Sometimes frozen vegetables are actually more nutritious than fresh vegetables because they can get harvested closer to the time of ripeness because they don't have to survive transportation to the store. So they get harvested right at the right time, flash frozen right away, and preserves all those nutrients. The other thing I want you to watch out for in terms of pesticides is the Environmental Working Group has a list every year called the Dirty Dozen, and these are the foods with the most residual pesticides. All of those you should get organic. It's mostly berries and lettuce and I think potatoes. I don't know exactly what's on the list this year, but it's easy enough to look up. And I'll put a link in the Telegram channel. And the other thing you might consider is ketogenic or carnivore diet. There's a lot of good data now about how ketogenic diets can help fat burning, can reverse diabetes, and can actually, believe it or not, make your lipid numbers better. Beyond picking what foods, you should also concentrate on the times that you're eating throughout the day. So we're going to talk about intermittent fasting. Fasting is one of the best ways to get your body in shape with a kickstart. You can ramp up slowly by starting with a 12-hour eating window, which case you would eat from basically 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I suggest making that window shorter. I almost every day eat from between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. So basically, I'm skipping breakfast and I'm not snacking a whole bunch in between. But that narrow feeding window is called intermittent fasting, where you're fasting for 16 hours, right? And this has been shown to reduce inflammation by 70%. It also starts a process called autophagy. Autophagy, auto means self, phagy means eating. Your body is eating itself. I know, sounds crazy, but when it eats itself, it's basically getting rid of the weakest cells among them. There's called senescent cells, which are hanging around and not really making proteins effectively, and it gets rid of those first. If you want to extend your autophagy, you can even go into 2, 3, 4, 7-day fasts with water only. That's sort of advanced, which I wouldn't recommend doing right away. I would recommend working up to that. I've done some of those. And I try to do 72 hours every 3 months. So a 3-day fast every 3 months. It kind of has a ring. It happens every season. And by intermittent fasting in between, then it makes it to not that hard. Finishing up and keeping it simple. You want to do 2 meals a day, basically. You can have a snack in between. In your guidebook, it has some meal ideas in your guidebook for anti-inflammatory eating. I don't want you to overthink it. I want you to think of food as nourishment for repair and fuel and energy. You know, the Greek philosopher Hippocrates said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." Food can be a killer or food can be a medicine. The foods that we're choosing are healthy. The foods that we're excluding can be killers. And so I want you to keep that in mind when you fuel your body. Try to avoid emotional or mindless eating. I want you to stay intentional about your eating, right? I want you to remove the processed foods, incorporate the whole foods, focus on nutrient dense and clean sources, practice mindful eating and keep your portion sizes in control. Don't eat after 8 o'clock at night. Nothing good happens late at night. And schedule your fasting periods so that they're easy. Beyond that, I want you to post in the Telegram group, all right? I've created an acronym called RESET for the 5-day reset. And I want to hear from you. I want you to share this with all of us. We're all in this together. I want you to, R is reflect. Reflect, what did you notice about today and your habits? How did it make you feel? E is for excel, and it stands for like a win. What was your win today? S is a struggle, like what did you struggle with in terms of fasting or cutting out those foods? E is for something enlightening. I want you to share something you learned with the group. And T is for a thought, like a thought that you have. So I want you to post these things daily. We'll be in this together. I'll post mine. Reset is the acronym. I'll put that into the Telegram channel. And, this is a solid group that we can hold each other accountable and support each other with any challenges. Beyond that, looking ahead, here's what to expect from the video that drops tomorrow. We're going to talk about sleep and sleep hygiene. I want you to look up the anti-inflammatory recipes and keep posting. There's the Telegram group for support. You can email me with any questions, and there's my website. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is my first time doing this stuff, and I really appreciate those of you who signed up. Thanks, and have a great day.